Welcome to our election analysis on the morning after polling day. Of course, there are seats still to be declared. This was perhaps more of an online election than many people thought. I was certainly tweeting and Facebooking all night, and my questions are appropriately enough on my iPhone. I'm going to start with Robin Bew and just ask you, Robin, how do you think the markets are going to react to the likely election result? Because we still don't know it for sure yet.
I don't think they're going to react very well. We knew that it was going to be very close, likely to be a hung parliament, and that now looks almost certain, well, absolutely certain. But I guess what we have seen is that we're in a situation where the Conservatives, even in conjunction with all of the Northern Irish parties, will be unable to command a majority, but also a Lib Pact wouldn't command a majority either. So a lot of uncertainty about how this is going to go, who will end up in number 10, and if whoever ends up in number 10, whether they can govern effectively, and that's something the markets really don't like, and we can see that being reflected in sterling already.
And quite disappointing for the Lib Dems, I think, had the most rotten night of the lot of them, didn't they?
Yes, definitely disappointing from the Lib Dems compared to after the first debate, at any rate, or even after the third debate. But of course not compared to the beginning of the campaign, really. I mean, they could have actually done quite a lot worse because they didn't have the Iraq war factor, which helped them in 2005. And they did slightly improve. So I think the lesson is that if without the debates they would have actually done really badly, whereas they're still there, a player in the British political scene at least. But it was a disappointing night for them, yeah.
And we now have the prospect of a lot of uncertainty with regards to the 6 billion cuts that the Tories would like to impose, but or we believe they'd like to impose. And in terms of an emergency budget that's been discussed in the campaign, is any of this going to come to pass now?
Well, I think some form of emergency budget will have to come. I think already this morning you've seen some negative reaction in the markets, in sterling, in gilts. So obviously it depends on how long and how sort of willing the markets still are to put up with a period of uncertainty. The problem is, as Robin described it, is that there is no even obvious short-term solution between a Lib Pact or a minority Conservative government with any mandate at all to provide this emergency budget. So it is hugely uncertain short term, and that's very bad for the markets at the moment.
And the Tories likely to have to rely on the Ulster Unionists. There's talks about deals having been done on the cuts that Northern Ireland was likely to face. I mean, would it be too flippant to say some of those cuts might be heading towards Scotland instead?
I think, given the situation that we see, nothing's too flippant at the moment. But remember that having a deal with the Irish politicians wouldn't be enough, actually, to allow the Tories to command a majority. So as far as we can tell at the moment, even there, they would still have to scrape together some support from other quarters in order to get a budget through. So I think, yes, you're going to see the pressing need for the market to deliver cuts, but it will actually be extraordinarily difficult to do the things that all the parties agree that needs to be done. So yes, maybe Scotland's in the firing line to some extent, but actually it's going to be very hard for them to command a majority to do anything.
I mean, if a Lib Dem Conservative coalition is the likely outcome, and we really don't know that. I mean, it could go any way. But what do you think would be the Lib Dem emphasis on a budget? For example, they were saying that they wanted honesty in terms of spending cuts. I mean, how's Vince Cable going to influence the first budget, do you think, by the Conservatives?
Well, it won't be a coalition, but I mean, he might have to support a budget. The Conservatives might have an emergency budget with 6 billion cuts, but these are pretty mild. So actually, what really matters is what's going to be the budget for for the following year, probably. Vince Cable. The Liberal Democrats are really in a very weak position. They just got to play a very weak hand as well as they can, because if they stop the Conservatives from governing, then the Conservatives will say, well, look, we've proven that a hung parliament doesn't work, and the Liberal Democrats are not responsible enough. So they've got to really support what the Conservatives do, unless they do something which is obviously going to be very unpopular and which they can really fight an election on.
And I mean, in terms of city regulation, we've just had the FSA slapping the Prue. I thought that looked like the last swan song of the FSA, but the Tories obviously talking about beefing up the Bank of England. I mean, does that whole debate get thrown up in the air now, even if we do get Cameron in as Prime Minister?
I think it's been up in the air throughout the campaign, and I don't think there was any expectation that there'd be a firm decision post polling. In terms of financial reform, Lib Dems are actually slightly closer to the Conservatives than the Labour Party is. So if things emerged and it was a Lib Dem supporting a minority Tory government, then financial reform may go forward faster than under a Labour government. But there is huge uncertainty given that the strength of the financial services sector in the UK. I think the Lib Dems, or the Lib Dem proposals to actually crack down quite hard on areas of the sector, are pretty unrealistic in the short term, at least, without international cooperation on many areas.
A final thought then from Robin on the whole election.
We've ended up in a window where enormous uncertainty, the markets really aren't going to like it, and I think that means certainly for the next year or so there's going to be a tremendous amount of interest in politics, a tremendous inability on the part of whoever is in number 10 to get their policies through, and we're going to get another election sooner than perhaps many of us would like.
Thank you, Robin, Charles and Neil. And just to say that we'll be following up a lot of these themes obviously in the regular Global Forecast programme, where I'll be rejoining Robin in about a couple of weeks' time, so tune in, and hopefully we'll have a government by then. Thanks a lot for watching, and goodbye.